everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gripe, the show for short, sweet reviews of new release movies, plus the one thing that annoyed me the most. And today I'm going to be talking about Me Before You. And just as fair warning, there will be spoilers, because I don't feel like I can talk about this movie effectively without addressing the twist, I should say, or at least like the big reveal in this movie. So, but either way, let's go right into what the story's about. So, Me Before You stars Emilia Clarke and Sam Claflin, who, you might know him from the Hunger Games movies. He played Finnick in the Hunger Games movies. And Emilia Clarke is, of course, the mother of dragons. So, basically it starts with Sam Claflin is, a successful guy. He's got a girlfriend. He's obviously very successful at what he does. And he, on a rainy day happens to get into an accident. He's walking across the street and gets hit by a motorcycle. So, and what that does is basically it paralyzes him from, basically the shoulders down. So, and Emilia Clarke plays a girl who, she's kind of a quirky, not necessarily, like really oddball, but she's, very talkative, very friendly. She has some very weird outfits. And, she's basically working to support her family. And at the beginning, she gets laid off of her job because the cafe that she works at is closing, so she no longer can have a job there, basically. So she starts to look for work. She, basically is looking for something, and she's basically a person who doesn't have any direction. She doesn't know what she wants to do with her life, so pretty much she's open to anything. And she finds this job where she doesn't need any qualifications. It seems to pay well, but there isn't a lot of detail. It's basically just a caretaker job. And so when she goes to find out what the job is, she finds out she's there basically to take care of this paraplegic man, played by Sam Claflin, who, and not so much take care of him in the medical sense, because he has basically a caretaker in that regard, played by Stephen Peacock, who the only other movie I've seen him in was Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, and he did a pretty good job in that one, so I was curious to see how he did in this one. But he, basically he takes care of the medical side, while Emilia Clarke's character is supposed to take care of just kind of like keeping him in high spirits, just kind of being there for him, when Stephen Peacock's character can't be there. And so, when she has her interview with, I'm going to start calling them by their character names, because it's very confusing. So Emilia Clarke plays a character named Lou, Sam Claflin plays a character named Will. And so when she goes to, basically interview for the job, she talks with Will's mom, who obviously is a little bit put off by her, but she can tell this is not somebody who is interested in, trying to be a medical caretaker. She's there just, obviously, to be, supportive and all that. So she gets the job right away, and when she first meets Will, Lou has no idea what to do. She doesn't know how to react to the guy. She tries to be friendly, and he is just immediately off-put by her. So, her job is pretty much just to sit there and, in case he needs something, help him out if he absolutely needs something, but otherwise wait until Stephen Peacock's character comes back. His character's name is Nathan. I have a handy little tool here to tell me what these people's names are, but Nathan. So basically, when Nathan comes back to kind of do that. And as she's trying to get into Will's world, he just continues to push back, and ultimately she kind of yells back at him. She kind of fights back and says, all she's trying to do is put some bring some kind of light and joy into his life, and the confrontation they have actually kind of changes his mind a little bit, that maybe he has been just giving her a rough go, and maybe he she deserves a chance to make her case just the same as anybody else. And so they actually start to bond a little bit, and she learns a little bit more about him. He learns a little bit more about her, and kind of why she is this way, and why she has, as a lot of people say it, she has so much potential that she doesn't seem to use, that she just is kind of in autopilot in her life, and she's not taking control of it. And as the movie goes on, they both start to grow with each other. She wants to, find ways to really, build up him, build up his self-esteem. That even though he can't live the life he used to be able to live, that there is still beauty in the world, and there are still things to find joy in. And that's where here's where the big spoiler is. She basically discovers that he is planning on ending his life. He's basically already set up that he's going to end his life after at a certain point. And so her goal then becomes to try to convince him that life is worth living, to show him that there is still beauty in the world. And that means, taking him to the horse track, which is a terrible idea, taking him to, a symphony, which actually is kind of this really special moment for both of them, going with him to a wedding, but ultimately realizing that, she has this secret, and she feels like she's, helping him, build, see that life is worth living, but ultimately, when they go on this vacation, she finds out that she can't change his mind. And it starts to make her wonder, is she a failure? Or why is she wasting her time on somebody who is basically ready to die? But when she looks at her life, she looks at all this, basically what he has kind of helped her with and shown her, that the life is worth living, because she has she has her family that she's trying to take care of, which is why she took this job, is to take care of her parents and, her grandfather. And she has a boyfriend who's played by Matthew Lewis, who's the guy who played Neville Longbottom in the Harry Potter movies. So he plays this fitness trainer guy who's so focused on fitness and all of his activities. He's a very stereotypical kind of just self-absorbed boyfriend, and certainly very threatened by Will when they finally interact. He starts to see that even though Will is paraplegic, that he still is kind of a threat to to his claim over Lou's heart. But through the end, she ultimately realizes that her boyfriend is not there to support her. Her family, is starting to get by without her. But what does she need in her life? And that is to kind of, resolve the feelings in her heart for Will, as well as, take to heart everything that he did help her with and show her. And so, in the end, he does ultimately die, but she is there with him. And, she kind of makes his last moments in the world happy and peaceful. And at the end of the movie, she's in Paris, basically, kind of living this, this memory that he has of this place and this situation that brought him so much joy and, to experience the world. And that's what she does, is she wants to experience the world kind of in her own right, and, to, take hold of her life and kind of move forward that way. Even though it's without him, it's still, she still has the strength to do so, and, the confidence that was kind of lacking before, where it was potential before, but now it's actually happening. It's something that she's actually going out and doing in life. So, and that's how the movie ends. So, it's certainly a formulaic drama in a lot of ways. It's got the romantic elements of the boy and the girl who, at first don't like each other, but they get used to each other, and then they like each other, and then there's a conflict where they don't like each other, but at the end they do like each other, and tragedy strikes. It's kind of, the way I almost felt like this movie is it was a walk to remember if the situation were The Untouchables. The Untouchable, and that was when I first saw a preview for this movie, I was like, is this just a romantic version of Untouchables? And if you haven't seen Untouchables, you should, because that movie is amazing. It's a French film, came out a few years ago. It has Omar Sy who plays basically a ex-con who's trying to get back on his feet, and he, goes to be a caretaker for this wealthy man, this wealthy paraplegic man, and the two of them form this interesting friendship. It's a fantastic movie, and I was worried that this would kind of be that same movie, but this one actually has an interesting twist to it. Sort of when you think of, you know, the biggest challenge of this movie is the fact that he wants to die, and there's nothing that's going to change his mind. Even if Will and Lou start to form this relationship, and it is almost a romantic relationship, even if they formulate that bond between them, his mind is still set on this. And watching it, it's complicated because you're kind of torn between this idea that just because somebody is paraplegic or that their life becomes so much more challenging than it was before that tragedy struck doesn't mean that they feel that their life is worthless. So there's this like kind of, you know, tricky message that they're putting out there that you know, if this happens to somebody, then suddenly they want to die, which is obviously not true in reality. But the other side of that is the right to die debate, which is, you know, that individuals have the right to decide their own fate. If they are diagnosed with a terminal illness, or if something like this happens where their life is just completely, you know, upended, they have the right to choose if they want to pass away, and do so kind of peacefully and on their own terms. And that's really what this boils down to, is, you know, he made this choice, and as much as she tried to convince him otherwise that, you know, he shouldn't do that, this was the choice he made, and he couldn't change that. But there's a sort of beauty in, you know, how this movie plays out, because when they hire her to basically be his friend, you know, someone he can hang out with, someone who can kind of be there and, you know, hopefully make his days a little bit better. And they do form this bond of friendship, and this, you know, sort of budding romance as they go, you know, as the story progresses. I'm not going to call it a romance per se, because I mean it sort of it doesn't really it subverts the typical romantic story where, you know, it's like it's all about this like deep romantic love, whereas this one it's a very deep affection that they have for each other, but not it doesn't always feel romantic. It almost feels more like this deeper bond that the two of them share. That there is a romantic element to it, but it's not strictly romance. There's something even more. And as she, especially in the last scene that they spend together, when she goes to I think it's Austria to spend time with him before he passes away, and it's such a tender and, you know, beautiful scene that just, I mean, they don't even go into the death. It's pretty much right after that she's in Paris, sort of moving on from everything that happened, but obviously it's such a profound moment for her. And so it's certainly a complicated movie in that term, because you're not sure how to feel. It's like, I mean, there's a lot of emotions, obviously, and it's sad. It's sad when, you know, you realize that he is going to die, and there's nothing that she can do about it. And, you know, it's one of those movies that I had to be careful not to cry. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's... And there was one moment that got really close, and it's interesting, the moments that almost make me cry or do make me cry. In this case, it was a moment where they come back from their vacation, and basically the last conversation they had, Will says, "There's nothing you can do to change my mind. I am going through with this." And Lou is like, I can't do this. I can't. And so, you know, when they arrive back in England, you know, Will's parents show up and basically, you know, try like, "How are things? You want to go to dinner?" And she basically says, "I can't do it." And as she's leaving the airport, Will's mom goes and kind of chases her down to see what happens. And in that moment, she says, "You can keep my payment. You know, I don't want it." Sort of this thing. And there's this. What you see in that moment is the true love of the story. It's not so much a romantic, but just that, like, she can't imagine that all the goodness and everything that they've shared, he's willing to throw away so much, and it's painful to see that realization, that truth in her face, that everything that she's been doing to try and, you know, build him up and, you know, be caring and supportive for him, everything she's tried to do to basically prevent him from going through with his plan of killing himself has failed. And that moment of like recognizing the failure and not wanting to face it it's heartbreaking. It really is a heartbreaking moment. And so the movie has some scenes like that that are absolutely beautifully done, beautifully shot, and well done by the actors. It's a peculiar movie in a lot of ways because Emilia Clarke, her character is so almost like naive in a sense. I don't even know if I want to say naive, but just almost like aloof. That's the kind of best way to describe her character. She's always smiling. It's so weird to see the Mother of Dragons smiling because you never see her smile in the show. But she's always like smiling. She's always wearing these bizarre outfits, and to throughout the movie, you're almost like, is she playing a parody of a kind of character, or is this her character? But you see that her character is so positive and trying to find the goodness in trying to find the good in the world. And obviously in that moment, it is confirmed in that moment when she says, "I don't want my payment," that her character has always been this like very somewhat naive but also innocent type of character. And then when she realizes the reality of the situation she's in, she does, you do see that humanity, the reality kind of hit her, and it's striking. So Emilia Clarke definitely did a fantastic job in this movie. There's certainly some very cliche parts in the movie that, I can't necessarily fault Emilia Clarke or Sam Claflin for that reason, because it's just, that's the way the story is. They try to Hollywoodize it as much as they can. But there's a lot of moments that are also very humanizing. And I especially go back to that scene where, they spend together before he passes away, as it's almost out of the ordinary in terms of these, the movies that we see nowadays. Like, it popped into my head thinking of The Danish Girl when Lily Elba passed away at the end of that movie. The moment is meant to just like try to milk it so much and try to milk the emotions out of people, and to me that sometimes ruins the effect of the movie. Whereas here, I think it actually enhanced it, that it wasn't this like trying to like really just like jackhammer at your tear ducts to try to make you cry, that it was just this tender, intimate moment that they're leaving you with a happy moment, knowing that after this, he's dead. He's gone after this moment, which I think was a fantastic choice on the part of the writers and the director of how that scene was done. Very well done, and it certainly, I think, punctuated the effect of this movie. Now, is it a perfect movie? No. It's still very cliche in a lot of parts, and there's a lot of moments that just kind of, you're like, it's okay. And, Matthew Lewis's character, he's funny, he's kind of a, interesting character to throw in there, but he's a caricature of, like the snooty boyfriend, cliche. And you do have those cliches throughout the movie, and it's just kind of annoying that you have to, kind of suffer through that when you have this beautiful story that's going through that's building up throughout the movie. But, the actors all did well. Matthew Lewis, Sam Claflin, Emilia Clarke, Janet McTeer plays Will's mom, Charles Dance plays Will's dad, and they too, like, the parents are also an interesting character set, because the two of them obviously are struggling with this just as much as Lou's character, as Lou, but at the same time, they're also kind of in the reality of, like, this is the deal we made with him. This is what he wants, and we have done everything we can on our end to help him out, but this is the choice he's made. So, they do a good job there as well. And, I mean, ultimately, you get to the end of the movie and you ask, I mean, did they do enough necessarily to hammer home the effect of this movie? And it's hard to say, because you're going to get a different the end of the movie is going to create mixed reactions. It's certainly going to create mixed feelings about it, but ultimately that's going to be a personal taste. I personally think I liked how the movie ended. I wasn't as keen on some of the other parts of the movie, which, I mean, my key gripe in this movie, aside from some of the very cliche writings, that's a little too general. But there's a scene specifically where it's Lou's birthday, and she basically brings Will to her home to have this, to have her birthday, kind of dinner and celebration. And as as they're having cake, they give her presents, and her boyfriend, Matthew Lewis's character, gives her the gift he gives her is basically a necklace with his name on it. And I thought that scene, it was meant to be somewhat humorous, but it was like, this is the kind of silly, like romantic comedy type of activity that you would expect, or that you would see in like that's a silly romantic comedy, to try and paint the boyfriend as, the bad guy. And I just thought that in this movie, it didn't really work, because at no point did this movie feel like that was the kind of setup they were trying to do. They were trying to do this like romantic comedy. Yes, I mean, there were certainly comedy elements in this movie. There were, moments of like romance, but not to this degree, where you have this like it's like, here's a necklace with my name on it, happy birthday. It just it fell very flat. And I think not just that scene, but that's indicative of some of the choices that they made throughout the movie that I think did not work in this movie's favor, in this story's favor. Now, granted, obviously they wanted to try to keep it as lighthearted as possible given the subject matter. I just think they did not do it particularly well at certain points in the movie, and that scene just kind of highlighted how bad it could get. Like, Matthew Lewis's character, not taken away from how he did as an actor, but his character as a whole just felt out of place in this story, because everybody else felt somewhat real except for him. His entire character almost felt like, this is where we throw in that romantic comedy type of character to, give the girl some, question, some doubt, but ultimately I just don't think he added much value to the story. So that's my key gripe, is kind of the cliches that they did throughout there, and specifically from that scene. So overall, I mean, it was an enjoyable movie. I think, when I look at, the Rotten Tomatoes score and see it's kind of middle of the ground, middle of the road, I can understand why it would divide people, and why some people would say it's not perfect and not super striking, which is, I mean, it's certainly not an Oscar-worthy movie in any stretch. I'm going to say that it's a kind of mid-tier drama, but I think it does a lot of things well enough to certainly earn a positive rating. I would give this movie 7 stars out of 10. It's flawed, certainly, and it has, it also wraps up very quickly too, which, that's a choice that sometimes I agree with, sometimes I don't agree with. And in this case, I think they could have maybe done a little bit more at the back end, but I do think that what they did at the back end was certainly well done. But overall, I think the cliches in this movie and some of the dialogue really pulled it down. Otherwise, it could have been a much better movie. It has the right story. It certainly had the right cast. I just think that some of the cliches that they put in there really brought this movie down a little bit. But otherwise, fantastic movie. I would highly recommend it. So that's my review of Me Before You. If you have any comments on that, if you agree, disagree, it's up to you. I don't care. Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you next time on Key Gripe. Take it easy, folks. That's a bad send-off. Don't.